Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
Watching Conversations with Jennylyn, formerly known as The Jennylyn Show. And as always, I bring you fascinating people with fascinating stories. At least I try to, and I have in the past, and today is no exception. My guest, Brandon Watkins, is a Stanford University Children's Hospital employee who has just done something phenomenal for the hospital. And I can't wait for him to tell you about it. Brandon?
Nice to meet you, Jennylyn. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this wonderful endeavor of yours with us. I saw you made the newspaper, so I thought I better go get that story. So tell me, what did you do?
So I decided to run a marathon on each of the 7 continents, plus New Zealand, because some people consider New Zealand to be the 8th continent. So I decided to start in New Zealand and go from there to Australia, to Singapore, to Cairo, to Amsterdam, to New York, then to Chile, and then finally in Antarctica on consecutive days, and run a marathon in each of those places.
Wait, stop. Consecutive days? But these countries are so far apart. So tell me how you did it consecutive
Well,
days.
so that was part of the challenge. It's I'd heard about this sort of adventure that we were calling it, that was organized by somebody who I'd gone on one of these marathon adventures with before. So he'd organized this trip where we were flying on coach. We were flying on, like regular scheduled commercial airlines with regular flights. So we flew into New Zealand a few days early, and then ran a marathon that morning, and then ran to the airport and got on a flight to fly over to Western Australia, ran the marathon, then carried on each day, basically having a couple of hours sleep in a hotel, and then run the marathon, go to the airport, and then repeat, every single day. So.
Oh my God. So you ran 8 marathons, and how many did you win?
Well, I mean, some of them were pretty small, but I happened to win 4 of the 8.
I'm a hero.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that. I think the final marathon in Antarctica was the one that I think was most proud of. I'd actually run in Antarctica in 2013 before. I'd just done 2 marathons back to back at that time, but I managed to finish second in that race. And so this race, there were 60 competitors, and I was thrilled to be able to actually win that one. The other marathons, there was only a handful of people that were in that, so I don't think that was a great competition. But the final one, I felt pretty good about, so that was good.
Well, you made the cover of the Daily Mail. Is it the Daily Mail that I read?
The Daily Post, I think.
The Daily Post, one of those newspapers. But how much money did you raise?
So that's a good point. So I was raising. I decided to raise money for the Children's Fund at Stanford Children's Hospital, which helps with lots of really great programs. That are actually allow kids and families without any kind of financial, regardless of their financial circumstances, they come and get great care here through this program. And it also provides great individual programs like pet therapy. There's I posted a blog throughout all this, and one of the pictures on there was this kid. She's a 6-year-old kid called Hadley, and she is one of our long stay patients. But the Children's Fund there actually allows for pet therapy, which is pets, there's a Labrador, a pet Labrador that comes in. Donatella's her name, and actually meets with the kids and totally brightens up their days. So she came in, you could just see in her eyes just the spirits being raised. So I was lucky enough to be able to raise money for the Children's Fund there, and I managed to raise $6,500. So I was very happy with that, and there was a lot of love and support. $6,500. Yeah. So.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Look at all the children's lives that you're going to touch.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's mean, I think the kids' lives are touched all the time at Stanford Children. So I was just fortunate to be able to do just a small part. But the energy and support from everybody around was just phenomenal. So I felt very lucky.
I could imagine the adrenaline trying to get from one country to the next in 8 days and run this marathon.
Yeah, well, that was part of the challenge, frankly, like the logistical challenge of all this and seeing how my body would adapt to the jet lag and the just the nature of just jumping around from place to place. But thankfully, even though we were in a bubble in this whirlwind kind of travel, it just seemed just to flow just naturally, and it was fun.
Are you the only American who participated in this marathon?
No, there were 3 of us who did full marathons, and there were 3 who did half marathons in this trip. So there was an American who lives in Colorado right now. There was a person from Finland, and me, who I'm from Ireland originally, but I have American citizenship now. So yeah, and I think there was 2 Americans who ran half marathons as well.
Wow. How many of them won? We have to do this. I have to ask you.
I don't think it was like we weren't necessarily competing with each other, but I think we established we weren't we were like very cohesive together, so it wasn't like a competition amongst ourselves. So we established pretty early that who were faster and who was second fastest and who was third fastest, and we generally stayed in that line.
That's great. So you guys sort of dominated the scene. Did you have a lot of participants? Because if it's only 3 of you, naturally one of you will be first.
Yes, and so it usually ended up being like me first, so the Finnish guy second, and the other American third. When we went to Antarctica, there were 60 or so participants. Yeah,
wow.
And actually, it was really cool. The 27 of those were African Americans as part of the biggest group of African Americans who'd ever set foot in Antarctica, and they ran the marathon.
And you beat them?
Well, it was fun being around them. They had lots of energy and great support as well. Because actually, that race was probably my best performance in a race I'd ever done. Even though I'd just run 7 marathons before, I just felt like the culmination of that whole adventure it was almost like me being like a coiled spring, where I held a little bit back each day, but was able to go out and just really enjoy that final performance. And I got lots of support and energy from all the other participants on the course, which was phenomenal.
What was it like at the end of it? How did you feel?
I felt great. I mean, I thought going into this that, like, people were asking me, what's next? Like, you do this crazy event and then what happens afterwards? My initial thought was like, look, let me get through the end of this. Let me just enjoy this experience. But at the back of my mind, I was thinking like, well, one goal that I have is to win a race. I came second in Antarctica before. I actually went out to try and win a race in Southern California, and I came second, and I hadn't done that. And this, in Antarctica, I felt like this was a fully legitimate race that I was able to win. So I throughout this amazing adventure, I ended up kind of culminating in a high. So I just felt just overwhelmed and emotional and thankful for, like, there were so many facets of this. I mean, the fact that I spent time in each different location, got a sense of the culture, but also what resonated really for me was a lot of the support and energy coming in from everybody, because of this worthy cause, but just all this energy being harnessed, and that was just a euphoria when I finished.
I can imagine. Had you visited all of those countries before, or any of them?
Yeah, well, I'd been on Antarctica obviously before. I'd been to Chile. One of the marathons was in I was in New York, so that was fun because we actually had lived there. Davika and I had lived there before. I had never visited New Zealand, and I hadn't been to Perth or Singapore. And Cairo. Cairo was actually possibly the best experience of this entire trip. Cairo was. We actually, so when we got there, there's not a big running culture in Cairo. And actually, it was interesting. We flew in late at night. As soon as we got out of the airport, there was chaos at the airport. There was a lot of hustle and bustle going on. So we drove and tried to find a hotel in the streets of Cairo, and that was an experience by itself.
You didn't have a hotel booked ahead of time?
No, we did, but we were trying to find where it was. But it was
okay.
buried in the middle of Cairo, and so driving around in the middle of the night after just flying in from Singapore was kind of a surreal experience. And then when we finally got to a hotel, it was more like apartments, and I had sort of a cultural experience of living in the city for just this one night. And as I was going to bed, there were all these barking dogs outside. There were stray dogs that were around, and I was thinking, wow, we have to run in the streets with these stray dogs the next day. So what the organizers did, these were all locally organized races. They paired us up with other runners to go and protect us both from the traffic and from any kind of danger, but especially from the stray dogs as well. So for the first half marathon, they actually had 2 runners with me running along for we ran through the streets of Cairo and out into some sandy area and came back. And then at the halfway point, those 2 runners separated, and then another runner picked it up with me and ran with me along the Nile River, which is obviously iconic and amazing.
Wow.
So we ran along there and back. Yeah, that was incredible. So while I was running, I was talking to them about their experience in Cairo. They're expatriates as well, and they were talking about their cultural experience of running in Cairo and just living there. So I really got a sense for that place.
Would you want to go back there?
Yeah, I mean, Cairo was interesting. Yeah, I mean, and afterwards we went to see the pyramids, which is iconic. So I think I'd love to bring our daughter there. But I think Davika and I have both been there now, so it's not necessarily on our bucket list. But at some point we'd like our daughter to go there as well.
What a fascinating experience that was for a good cause. So it was
Absolutely.
a win-win-win. You couldn't go wrong with anything.
Wow.
What was the most challenging experience you had on this entire trip?
So I think, physically, I was worried about this because I didn't know how my body was going to react. I'd never run, as many miles as that. The most I've ever run in a week has been 90 miles, and I did that in training for this. But this was 209 miles over the course of 8 days. So I was worried about how my body would react. And interestingly, after I ran the first marathon, my quads started hurting. That's the muscles in the front of my leg. Then the next day I ran and it sort of disappeared, and then it was my glutes started hurting, and then it was different parts of my body, but it always seemed like I'd have it for one day and it would disappear. But the biggest challenge probably physically was in New York when my left ankle swole up because I think of the pounding, constant pounding, and being in the air, flying as well. So I really had to favor one leg over the other during the race and sort of hobbled along and tried to make sure I was not turning aggressively on it or damaging it in any way. So I finished and I iced my ankle afterwards and took some ibuprofen, and the next day we landed in Chile and ran a marathon, and it was fine. So physically I didn't have too many issues, but I think, so, and emotionally, actually, it was good. I've kind of felt just excited because of the love and support coming from outside. It's just kept me going the whole time.
So it was really dependent on the airlines having your flights on time.
Exactly.
Could you imagine if for some reason they had to abort a flight? That would have screwed up the entire, at least one of your days, one of your events, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was that was interesting to me going in, how I would react to that, because that was absolutely out of my control, and I could have been very stressed about that. Actually, during this trip, one of the we were flying from, I think it was Cairo to Amsterdam, and we had a 55-minute turnaround time in Rome. And so I thought, there's no chance we're going to make that. We're going to have to, just fly directly to New York and skip the Europe marathon, because each of the marathons were locally organized. So they were going to go ahead in the day, regardless if we made it or not. But thankfully, all of that worked its way through, and I didn't have to get stressed out. But I deliberately said to myself, I'm not going to get stressed out about things outside my control, and I just felt good about it. I didn't, that was a challenge for me because, I had enough to worry about. I had enough to worry about the running and then the recovery afterwards and then the preparation for the next race, so, yeah.
That was a healthy attitude. I never see worry fixing anything for anyone. It amplifies the problem, if anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's easier said than done. Usually I would be stressed about these kind of things, but maybe that's what I just, I went in thinking that if I'm going to do this, I just have to be able to put that aside. And, so it was like not just a physical challenge, but also maybe an emotional and mental challenge. And I was happy with how that went.
You clearly traveled light. Yeah. You didn't have to stand around and wait for luggage.
Well, we did. We actually had one checked bag, but the good thing was the organizer actually sent us like matching luggage with our names on it. So we were all in it together. So there were 7 of us sort of traveling around the world in this bubble, and the organizer knew all the routine about what to do, how to pick up the bags, and where to go in the airport. So I just had to follow along and just kind of just to be marched along to each different place. So we managed, not a single bag was lost. It was actually interesting. On the way into Auckland, New Zealand, the organizer lost his bag. The airline mislaid his bags, but thankfully throughout all of this, no bags got missed.
So he clearly flew with you guys all the way.
Yeah, he went with us all the way as well, so that was good.
So he must have experience doing this.
Yeah, he's done this trip, I think, 2 years. So it's he's pretty adept at it now.
Yeah, I think it's just amazing that you did that. Would you do it again?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I had a great experience, but I think it's a huge challenge, and it's kind of like a once in a lifetime type thing. So I didn't want to, I don't want to top it. I want to just sort of enjoy this, and I'd actually run a marathon in each of the 7 continents before this, but just not in consecutive days. But this, I think, was going to be my pinnacle of running. So I just want to say, I've done this, not try to one-up this in any way, just enjoy it for a while.
That's good. It's a healthy attitude. Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to recuperate when you came home?
So when I came back, when I came back, actually, I felt bloated. I was partly on the trip, I was worried about not having enough energy for each of the marathons. Mm-hmm. So I was just eating everything. I would, anytime there was any kind of calorie in front of me, I would eat it. I would drink orange juice the whole way, and I would buy big Toblerone bars at the airport and eat them. So on my way back, that was the longest journey back from Chile. I had to go from Punta Arenas to Santiago, Chile. And I had a long layover, and then from Santiago I went to LAX, long layover, and then to San Francisco airport. But so that took me over a day to get back, and I was just eating lots of food. So I came home and I was bloated. I was about at least 10 or 15 pounds heavier than before I left. So, but part of it was water weight. So it took me I think a day or so. I went out for a run again the next day, and sort of had to struggle along with my run, but I kind of I felt recovered for running pretty soon afterwards, maybe a day or two, but the jet lag took another couple of days as well.
I could imagine. Yeah. Well, you look pretty athletic, so I would imagine you've always been someone who's kept yourself physically fit. Did you have to do a lot of preparation for this?
Yeah, well, actually, I used to play soccer, so I kind of took up running about 13, 14 years ago. And so I've just been running constantly since then. But for the training, actually, I ended up with almost a 9-month training plan for this.
Oh, so you prepared.
I did. I had different milestones throughout these 9 months. I first ran a 10K way back in June of last year, and that was something called a summer scamper that's organised for the Stanford Children's hospital as well. It's kind of a fun run where the goal is to raise money, but also to do a 10K or 5K. And so I trained for that, And then I translated the training from that into, I started training for a marathon in Ireland. And I got really slim and trained to be fast for that. And then after I did that in October, then I just tried to put on lots of miles, go out, and I ended up running 3 20-mile runs in a row just to see could I do it physically and mentally. And so that was my training. But there was no way of knowing if, like, I'd never run that many marathons in a row. So even no matter how much training I did, it was still like a lot of unknowns in how I was going to perform.
Wow, well, it sounds based on your success, you perform top notch.
Well, thank you.
But, and nothing is just all perfection. What's the one thing that really bothered you about the trip? There had to be one thing that got to you.
Right, well, so actually, I wouldn't say it got to me, but there was, actually, interestingly, I kind of think of this as an almost beautiful flaw. I decided to, when I ran my first marathon, my goal was to run it under 4 hours, which is a typical amateur runner kind of goal. And so for each of the marathons, when I started, I think I ran 3:45 in my first marathon, 3:50 something in my second. So I realized, okay, I can kind of hit under 4 hours, and I'll see if I can do it for each of them. In Singapore, it was hot and humid because it's so close to the equator. It was just the conditions were very tough. And so I paced myself and I thought, okay, I can walk at this point and then pick it up and run. And I ended up finishing the marathon in exactly 4 hours and 38 seconds. And I walked for a period of time where I could have gotten just less than 4 hours, but it was just due to my mismanagement of the clock. But in some ways, I just thought, that's a beautiful flaw. I didn't mind it. It wasn't I went into this whole experience just trying to relax and enjoy it, and just really enjoyed it. So even this thing that could be a minor annoyance didn't bother me at all.
Well, I grew up on the equator.
Yes, I know.
So the fact
So
that
did
you
my wife.
ran that race in that time frame and you're not from there, I think is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, actually, well, years ago I trained when I went with my wife Davika to Guyana, and I ran on the seawall. I did a 20-mile run on the seawall.
You know our seawall?
I loved it. That was a great experience. That was memorable. I was training for a marathon at that point as well, and I did 20 miles back and forth on the seawall. It was great. A lot of people out there, and it was nice and breezy, even though it was hot and humid.
So what do you think of Guyana? You've married one of its gems. What do you think of Guyana?
I loved Guyana. It was a great experience. When Davika and I went there, we spent a little bit of time in Georgetown, and then we actually took a boat out to Leguan, where Davika grew up for part of her life. And that was just a beautiful experience, just a lot of just gorgeous nature. We actually took a trip out to Kiteshore Falls as well. And
yes, you visited Kiteshore.
And that's amazing. That's incredible. So,
it's the second highest fall in the world.
Yeah.
And most people don't know about it.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience out there. So yeah, we had I kind of got a good feel. We spent about 3 or 4 days out there, and got a really good feel for the country and just the natural beauty of the place. So yeah, it was a great trip.
You went to Guyana, so you've landed. You've arrived.
Thank you.
There's so many causes in the world and so many ways that we could give of our time to benefit others. I have to tell you, what you have just done for those children is just, it's wonderful. And I really applaud you for the energy, the time, taking time away from work and family to do this for someone else. It's such an unselfish thing. What message do you want to leave for people watching this interview?
Thank you. I mean, I think, I'm not sure it's entirely unselfish. I felt like I wanted to do this as well, and I gained a lot of great experience from doing this. And frankly, there's I work for a great organization. I work for Stanford Children's Hospital, and I felt fortunate to be able to do this and to harness the positive energy and good wishes from people. So, there's great things that happen every single day by people who dedicate their lives and their careers to helping our kids, and the kids themselves have show such great courage. So I felt like I was privileged to be able to do this. I didn't feel like I was sacrificing much, but thank you.
Well, that's great that you have such a humble attitude. I hope that someone watching the show will find some time to do something, even if it's small. It doesn't have to be on such a large scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's international. So do you have any suggestions to somebody else watching that may want to contribute?
Well, sure. I mean, well, we have my blog actually still has places where people can donate to the Children's Fund through my cause. It's Brendan's 888quest.blogspot.com. But I'd just also say, like, running is great. It's just go out. If anyone just wants to feel the runner's high, go out and even run 2 miles, you'll get that runner's high. So I felt great that I was able to do my love and also like do it for a worthy cause as well. So it's good.
Brendan, thank you. Whenever I'm speaking with anyone who's inspiring me and others, the time flies. We're already out of time. Thank you so much for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. I hope you have been intrigued by Brandon's mission as I have been. And I'm hoping that somehow he's touched a chord in you and you will seek out places where you can make a difference in a child or someone else's life. And once again, thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn, and I will see you next time.
Thank you,
Brendan.
Thank you, Jenny.
This is really awesome.
Thank you.
You did that. I'm so glad I got the chance to do this with you.
That is cool.
Share
Thank
the
you.
story.
Yeah, thank you. It's very good. It was a good experience.